Every year in the NFL, there are bad teams. There are teams that lose a lot of games. It just kind of happens. You can't have every team winning a good amount of games. But in the past, I feel like it's been much easier to predict who those bad teams are going to be than it is right now, where it's kind of just a guessing game of who's going to have the worst injuries and who's going to regress in terms of talent. Uh, just to kind of look at some of the teams last year that were supposed to be good or supposed to be bad that kind of broke that mold and didn't go along with what everybody thought. The Texans, right? They picked second overall, then they traded up and picked third overall, and they had two big rookie pieces, big rookie question marks, and they ended up being extremely good. I think everybody kind of expected them to be in this sort of rebuilding mode. Their weapons weren't elite by any normal metrics, and CJ Stroud was a big question mark. Normally, rookie QBs don't come out of the gate as strong and as prepared as CJ Stroud was. The other thing is that coaching improved a ton for the Texans. The year before, I think that coaching was mediocre at best, and very good, I guess, when they had to win to get the second overall pick. But hiring D'Amico Ryans really improved that defense. The it just made the team a lot better. And then you look at a team like the Chargers, who, coaching has always been a question mark with Brandon Staley, but with Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and that core that they had put together on offense, Austin Eckler too, I think everybody just kind of expected they would always be a playoff team at least, like fringe playoff at the very worst. Like there may be like a 9-8, 10-7 team at the very worst, but they ended up with the fifth overall pick. It's just it's something that couldn't have been predicted. It was injuries, it was a combination of bad coaching and just some unluckiness on their part, some regression of Austin Eckler, the receiving weapons getting hurt, Justin Herbert getting hurt. It was just a really bad season for a team that was supposed to be pretty good. Then, sticking in that same division, the AFC West, we go to a team like the Raiders, who were supposed to be pretty bad and not really be a big contender. And they ended up going 8-9. They looked awful through half the season. They fired their head coach, but then they rallied. They ended up winning almost half their games, which is not something that I think anybody would have expected mid-season for them. And then the last team that's kind of a stretch to say, I guess, but the Cardinals, they were supposed to be the worst in the league. They weren't. They were the fourth worst in the league, so it's not much better. But they lost 6 out of their 13 losses by one score or, well, not less, but they lost them by within 7 points. They were within 7 points in 6 of their 13 losses, and they beat the Cowboys and the Eagles, which may not be great teams. They may constantly be in a state of, who knows if they're really good or not, but beating them as a team that was supposed to get the first overall pick and be deciding between Kyler and Caleb Williams, that's just not something that I expected to happen. And I don't think it's something a lot of people expected to happen. So now we get into kind of this season, and predicting these bad teams is more difficult now than ever. There's a lot of different power rankings this year before the season has even started. So it's, a lot of things haven't been decided yet. A lot of depth chart positions just haven't been announced or anything like that. But depending on the source, people are already making power rankings, and they're all different. I've seen like 6 or 7 teams that are kind of in that lower tier, that like these teams will be picking at the top of the draft next year tier. And those are the Patriots, the Panthers, the Broncos, the Giants, the Cardinals, and the Commanders. And then a team that I would throw in myself is the Raiders, who were supposed to be bad last year and weren't. But we'll get into each of these teams and kind of look at how they can be good, because I genuinely think that all of them could. So another thing of note is that the Patriots and the Panthers are currently not favored to win a single game this upcoming season. And that's not that they're in the betting odds that they're favored to go 0-16. It's that in each of their games, they are not the favorite to win, which kind of makes sense. Teams at the bottom of the barrel, you wouldn't expect to win, and other teams that are at the bottom of the barrel would be playing them. So it's just whichever the odds favor. But I want to talk about those two first, the Patriots first, because they're my team, and I want to get into this because I've kind of had this opinion all offseason. They were bad last year. They were a bad football team. They picked third overall. That was for a reason. But their defense was amazing. They had 9 out of their 13 losses as one-score games, where I said earlier that the Cardinals had 6 out of their 13 that were one-score games. The Patriots were even better than that on defense, and 3 of those games were impeccable defense, holding their opponents to 10 or fewer points. They lost all three thanks to the offense so much. But if the offense improves at all, they're a middle of the pack team at worst. Like that's a lot of Patriots fan bias, of course. It's going to happen. I'm acknowledging it right now. But I think that if their defense stays stagnant, which I think it will, they're getting back pieces that were injured last year. They've added to it and they've retained the good pieces. If their offense improves at all, they win at least half of those games that were one score games. And they go from a 3-14 or a 4-13 team to like an 8-9 team. And that's not outrageous to say if their defense stays the same. But I don't want to stay on the Patriots and keep talking about how I think they're going to be great. I do think they're going to have some bumps along the way, but I do think they're going to be better than a lot of people also think. But onto the Panthers. We've got Dave Canales being paired with Bryce Young. He revived the careers of Baker Mayfield and Geno Smith, and the offense can carry the entire team. We've seen offenses just carry teams before. There's no reason it can't happen again. If Bryce Young proves why he was a first overall pick, if Xavier Legette pans out, if Adam Thielen does some receiver things like catching the ball, that'd be nice. And they've got a few pieces on defense as well. Nothing crazy, and they lost Brian Burns, but they've got J.C. Horn. They've got players that play football on defense, and that's all the teams do. But they've got a couple mediocre to good pieces that could piece together a decent season. And overall, I think they have one of the toughest looks out of all of the teams, but they're in the NFC South, which is undoubtedly one of the weakest divisions in football. So I think if there's ever a time to be a bad team, it's when you're in the NFC South. Now we get into the teams that I genuinely don't think are going to be very good, but still, like I said at the beginning of this, there's a way they can all be good. And we're starting this off with the Broncos. My first note on them is that they will probably suck. They've got Pat Surtain, so their defense can be good, play through the best players. They've got Bo Nix and Troy Franklin. If Bo Nix wins the QB battle and Troy Franklin works his way up into the top 3 on that depth chart, they could have some college chemistry show to the pros. We've seen it in the past. We will see it in the future, that college teammates like playing together as pros. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase. I don't think that Bo Nix and Troy Franklin are on that level, just so we're clear. But I think that seeing college teammates succeed in the league leans me to believe that they could be good with Bo Nix and Troy Franklin. And then Sean Payton, his coaching pedigree is impeccable. He had some rough games last year, but he also had Russell Wilson, who I don't think that highly of as a quarterback. But again, it's tough. It's a tough look, and they're in a tough division. But they could win 6 to 7 games, and I don't think that's a crazy statement. They could win 5, 6, 7 games, and I wouldn't be super shocked by that. It's just about putting a run together at the right time, and that's going to be a common theme going forward. Now we get to the Giants, which is another rough look. But their defense is a little bit stronger. They've got Brian Burns, they've got Kayvon Thibodeau, they've got Dexter Lawrence, they've got Malik Neighbors and Andrew Thomas as 2 big offensive pieces, and they've got Daniel Jones. I am not a Daniel Jones fan, but I will admit he has played at a relatively high level before. He was the 5th overall pick, maybe a bit of a reach at the time, but he got that $40 million a year extension, and he got it for a reason. He was playing at a decent level. It was a little bit of an overpay at the time, so obviously he wasn't like an elite quarterback or anything, but he was playing well enough to warrant an extension. And if he asked for that and they wanted to give him an extension, they had to give him that. So if he can get back to that level with the best receiver that he's ever played with in Malik Neighbors, then I think now is the time. And if not him, then Drew Lock has shown some flashes in Seattle on the Seahawks. He showed that he could be an okay quarterback. And in this league, if you've got a decent defense that can make some stops, and you've got a quarterback who can manage the game, I think you can win a couple of games. And if you string together some wins, that's momentum, that's confidence, and that's all it takes for players who have played at a high level to get back to playing at that high level again. Now we get into the last 3 teams, which are teams that I genuinely do not think are going to be bad at all, but I'm seeing them towards the bottom of lists, and I just don't agree with it. First off with that is the Cardinals. They weren't awful last year. Like I mentioned earlier, they had 6 of their 13 losses within a score, and they beat some tough teams. And that's with Josh Dobbs and Clayton Tune, I think was their other quarterback when they traded Dobbs. But now we've got a full season of Kyler Murray. We got Marvin Harrison Jr. They got Trey McBride, Greg Dortch, Michael Wilson. Any of those 3 can break out and become a good elite second option for Kyler. And then James Conner, I'm not a huge fan of him either, but I can at least admit that he's a decent running back that can carry the rock and gain yards. And their defense is okay. They've got a defensive-minded head coach, which lends to the belief that their defense can outperform their individual pedigree. And they do have a couple of decent pieces. They got Darius Robinson, who was their first round pick this year, and then their second rounder from last year was BJ Ojulari. So they've got two decent edge rushers, and the other thing with them is their division. It's aging talent on the Seahawks and on the Rams. And then, the Niners are the Niners and they're probably going to win the division, but it's a tough division with some aging talents. There's room for the Cardinals to kind of step up and be that second or third team in the division and not just automatically be bottom of the AFC or NFC West. Then we get into the Commanders. They've got Terry McLaurin paired with Jaden Daniels, and if Jaden Daniels plays at the elite college level we saw when he won the Heisman, that's easily the best quarterback that Terry McLaurin has ever played with, and he's a great receiver. Then if we just switch to their defense, their elite interior defensive line of Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne just got even better with Johnny Newton through the draft. And they've got a couple pieces in the secondary, nothing great, but Emmanuel Forbes, he was a first rounder last year, a bit of a reach over, Christian Gonzalez, shout out the Patriots, but still, he was a first rounder, and he was a first rounder for a reason. Mike Sainristil out of Michigan is pretty good. Jeremy Chin has some talent. They could, once again, they could string together some wins. It's not a super, super likely thing, but it's something I could see happening, especially if that offense plays at a higher level, which is something that definitely could happen. And I do want to point out they did lose Chase Young, they did lose Montez Sweat, but if they just have that good production from their interior or trade one of their interior guys if they can't get an extension done with them, and lean on Johnny Newton being that replacement for one of the interior guys, that could go well as well. And then the last team, one that I wasn't really seeing a ton of on the bottom of these power rankings, but definitely a team that I think has some room to improve, is the Raiders. I talked about it earlier that they weren't bad last year. They didn't lose anybody big. They just got better. They lost Hunter Renfrow, but he wasn't a big part of their team last year. They lost Josh Jacobs, but I'm not a big fan of Josh Jacobs. I don't think he's that great. I think the year that he led the league in rushing, he led because everybody got hurt. And so he was just kind of the highest tier or the best of that mid tier of running backs. And maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe he'll be great on the Packers, but I'm just not a big fan of the contract they gave him. And so I'm not super against the Raiders letting him walk. And then the quarterback position is still a big question mark for them. Is it going to be Minshew? Is it going to be Aiden O'Connell? Aiden O'Connell knows the system. Gardner Minshew has proven that he can be a good quarterback in the past. But now they've got weapons. They had weapons last year. They added to them. They grabbed Brock Bowers. They have Michael Mayer. So those two tight end sets are going to go crazy. And then they've got Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. So those are 4 receiving weapons. That's typically what teams run. It's either 3 receivers, 1 tight end, or 2 tight ends, 2 receivers. And they'll be running a lot of 2 tight end sets with Bowers and Mayer. And then Bowers can pump out in the slot too and be a pseudo receiver, if you will. So if it does end up being Gardner Minshew, which I think it should be, it's going to be the best supporting cast that he's ever had. And I think that he can prove to be a serviceable quarterback in the league. And then moving on to their defense, it got better. They added Christian Wilkins, and they'll always be a threat with Max Crosby on that D-line. And whether or not their secondary is super strong, I don't think it is, but I still think that they can make an impact on the D-line, and their offense can win them games. So just to kind of close things out, right? There will be bad teams. I'm not saying there won't. I'm just saying that there is a feasible way for every single one of these bad teams or projected bad teams to win games and to be a middle of the pack team, maybe like lower middle of the pack in some of their cases. And I think that ultimately it's going to be injuries that dictate who the worst teams in the league are from here on out until there are expansion teams or until there's just a void of talent coming from college. I think that right now, talent coming out of college and into the draft is higher than it has ever been. There are 3rd, 4th round guys who are making genuine impacts on their teams, and it happens every single year. I think that it's going to continue to be like that and continue to be just unluckiness and injuries that keeps these bad teams, or not keeps, but makes these bad teams bad. I don't think it's a lack of talent. And I think that unless there's just a big wave of retirements where a lot of the top end older talent, and not even older, but like 28, 29 plus year old talent, unless a bunch of them just start dropping like flies and retiring, I don't think anything is going to change. That is about all I got for this episode, for this video, for this mind exercise, mental exercise. Definitely let me know your thoughts. Let me know who you think the worst team in the league is going to be, and come back to this video after next season and see these predictions, see who was actually bad. If it was a team that was supposed to be really good and they had some catastrophic injuries that took them down. And the last thing I want to leave you with is that maybe it's just because I wasn't like critically analyzing football at a young age, but this is the first time in a while that I have felt this way, that I felt that there is not a void of talent on a single team, where I felt that every team has a strength, where they are a big, like, maybe not top 10, but they're top half of the league. Every single team is top half of the league in some aspect, in some department. So for the last time, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Drop a like if you like this video, and stick around for more off-season fun content. Deuces.